For Sunday, July 19th, you found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, Governor Deal will investigate Planned Parenthood over fetal tissue sales. The NAACP says let's go ahead and sandblast Stone Mountain. And Fulton County is revisiting its sanctuary policy. Those are some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this fine Sunday. We'll begin by acknowledging what happened in Chattanooga, Tennessee Thursday, where 4 Marines were killed and another sailor seriously injured by apparently, well, not apparently, by a Muslim terrorist, a domestic terrorist. And we're not going to get into that. That's for the other programs on Sunday. But I wonder if President Obama will call this what it is, radical Islamic terrorism. Words he has refused to say. Will he say it now?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move on.
Well, we don't know if it's just a common criminal. I think we should get the facts first.
A Kuwaiti-born who was radicalized. The news has just come out recently.
Yeah, but he was an American citizen, too.
Yeah, he was apparently the standard deal.
Radicalized Muslim. Let's finish the sentence.
Well,
yeah, remember, this is the same president who, when the doctor, the Army doctor, shot up Fort Hood, Texas, the government called it workplace violence. As if the man's religious views had nothing to do with it.
This is what you get when you let in more Muslim immigrants and don't vet them.
It's interesting how you all have this conversation for this particular issue, and then when you talk about hate crimes and based on race or gender or other biases, you say it's just a crime.
All crimes like this are hate crimes by definition.
Well, I'm just saying.
I would agree with that.
Well, so a hate crime is a hate crime. It doesn't matter who does it.
Well, this Muhammad Abdul Abdulaziz was guilty of a hate crime as well.
But if someone is motivated by some extremism, like the young man in Charleston that was motivated by racism, we call it as we see it too. I think Obama ought to call it as it is.
That's the issue.
All of it is, the real issue is that all of it is domestic terrorism, whether it's in Charleston or Chattanooga.
Well, and I won't disagree.
But let's go the extra step further. That we're at war with radical Islam. Now, you would agree with that, wouldn't you?
Well, we got to figure out the extent of that war. Whether or not this young man,
you admit there's a war.
Whether or not this young man, 24 years old, just had something in his head like that fella in Charleston, or whether he was part of some organized, methodical group.
Well,
and we're going to see other.
But I'm glad that you know there's a war. Okay.
Yeah,
but let me button that up by saying this: it is clear that the forces of radical Islam have figured out a way to reach young Muslims in the United States. We're seeing too many incidents of this. This one was particularly painful and particularly tragic. All right, let's move on. Governor Nathan Deal this week said that he's going to launch an investigation of Planned Parenthood. Of course, they're the nation's largest abortion provider. Planned Parenthood, my eye, they're an abortion provider and they make money on it. Governor Deal wants to investigate them over this tape made elsewhere of a top Planned Parenthood official admitting that they harvest and sell fetal tissue. And I think the line was that she said rather cavalierly over her salad and wine, they want liver. It was very chilling, that video, and I think the governor's right to get into it.
Well, he is. Under Georgia state law, it is absolutely illegal to be selling body parts. And of course, it's immoral, too. It's a disgrace.
Well, the body parts actually can be donated by the person who is having the procedure, is my understanding, and that there are two researchers and others who are using the tissue for research purposes. And so it's
their defense is they pay only shipping and handling.
And that they pay for the costs of actually providing that. Because there is a cost that they incur.
I'm assuming you're shocked by the video. You saw that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I'm shocked by is the politicization of this issue nationally. It's as if these 15 Republicans running for president don't have anything else to campaign on. We have real issues facing this nation.
You don't think this is an issue?
I don't think that this is the thing that rises to the level of governors calling for investigations.
No, I'm shocked
when you see one video in California across the country, and so we're going to investigate 5 clinics in Georgia as a result of that. This didn't happen in Georgia. There's no allegation of anyone doing anything askance in Georgia.
If they're doing it at one clinic, you can bet they're doing it at most. I would just guess that.
I think that's an outrageous
Well, that's why you investigate. That's why you investigate.
You investigate because it makes nice headlines.
No, that's ridiculous.
Another one of these religious issues popped up this week when House Speaker David Ralston, seemingly out of the blue, but I think it was pretty well thought out, has called on the General Assembly to introduce what he calls a Pastor Protection Act. In such an act, a religious pastor would not have to perform homosexual weddings. He could opt out, or she could opt out. Not judges and clerks of the court and that sort of thing, but religious people would be allowed to opt out.
Another truly contrived issue. What pair seeking marriage is going to go to somebody where you've got to command or demand that they perform the service? That is absurd on its face. But go ahead and pass it because it means absolutely nothing. But apparently there's some political bounce that one or somebody derives from it.
It's an added protection. If you talk to lawyers, they will tell you, Jeff, it's an added protection. You've always said the First Amendment is there, but not everyone agrees with that. And I've also spoken with people.
Not everybody
I've also spoken with people close to Speaker Ralston, and this may be expanded in January when the General Assembly comes. It may be expanded, for example, to religious associations that try to help the poor, so that the radical left doesn't try to strip them of their ability to do this based on their religious concerns.
What? Say what?
You know, the radical left is attacking religion in this country. I know you don't want to talk about that.
I don't believe it,
and,
but go
and
ahead.
I know you don't believe it, want to believe it, but it's happening. In fact, look at the baker that was just fined. They didn't mind serving gays in their business, but what they didn't want to do was to do anything, bake anything for a gay wedding. It wasn't like they were discriminating against gays, but they had a sincere religious belief.
Well, let's go
I
to
think
the
this
next.
should cover this.
Let's go to the next topic I've got because it's related to this. It's about religious freedom, and it was a little bit overlooked this past week. But a federal court up north denied the right of the Little Sisters of the Poor. That's, you know, in sports terms, you got a weak opponent, you say, well, we play the Little Sisters of the Poor. Okay. But that's an insult to those great women who do great work, and that is the order of Mother Teresa. And a federal court said that they've got to abide by all the stuff in Obamacare that regards contraception and abortion. And obviously that is totally antithetical to what the Little Sisters of the Poor believe, but they lost in federal court. So Phil makes a good point. The left is on the march against all organized religion.
That's equal protection under the law for all citizens.
Go to a different hospital.
We get confused between with government's role in religion, whether government is for or against organized religion. Actually, there's a wall of separation in our country, so that we don't have an established religion.
We were supposed to have
and we want to make
liberty.
sure that we don't have,
as a country
and we
for
have
religious
full religious liberty
tell
here.
that to the
We
Little
just don't establish a religion at a government level, whether it's
What about
Muslim
that case
or
that he just
Christian
cited?
or any other. That's
don't
not
want
an
to talk about that.
establishment of a religion.
He doesn't want to talk about that case.
It's not an establishment of a religion.
All right, now turning back home into issues that don't involve religion. Interesting that the GBI quietly said this past week they're stretched too thin to investigate the many cases of police shooting civilians. It's hard for me to believe there are that many, but there are. And
I think the cameras have really changed things in the last couple of years, that dynamic. So you have to investigate. Now, I'm in favor of body cameras.
And I do like the idea of an outside investigation because I think the public has more confidence in it. But if we have to add more GBI officers, I guess we do. I wish we'd pay more attention to the cases of, like the DeKalb officer, Gregory Lamb, who was shot last weekend 6 times. We worry about these police shootings of civilians a whole lot more than we do about the police who are shot,
I don't think that's
injured,
true at
and
all.
killed.
I think that as soon as a police officer is wounded in the line of duty, they are on it like white on rice. And
Well,
they go.
and that police officer is somebody's son and somebody's husband, and I think that there's genuine concern throughout communities.
Well, we're guilty
for
of it
police
too.
officers. Yes.
The officer would have gone unnoticed if it hadn't been for the other issue. All right, before we turn to the hot button issue of the day, we'll take a break. When we come back, how about sandblasting Stone Mountain? Somebody's serious about this. We'll be back.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at myfoxatlanta.com.
Sometimes it's the nature of a joke. You say, well, if we're going to do away with all these Confederate symbols, let's do away with the carving on Stone Mountain. But there are people who believe this, and this week the head of the Atlanta NAACP proposed that the side of the mountain, the granite carving there, be sandblasted. erasing the images of Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, and Jefferson Davis. The very fact that it was proposed, headlined, discussed, there must be people who really think this is something that should be done. And it would go to what Phil said last week, erasing all vestiges of history. Is that a reasonable position?
I don't think that
it
erases
is.
vestiges of history, it just erases a piece of art that is dubious at best as far as art, but it is an amazing carving. But I kind of liked Mike Lukovich's idea of maybe replacing, what was it?
Samuel L. Jackson takes the place of Stonewall Jackson.
Yeah. I thought that was a good idea.
Well, I was saying,
the number of movies Samuel L. Jackson does, he almost deserves something like that. He's in every movie that's released.
Especially after Django, right?
Well, I appreciated what you said, though. You had said in a previous broadcast that it is a memorial. It's like a museum. State law protects this. It's just a radical black trying to stir things up. It's a memorial, and let's have it here. There's other. If you're in a public
using
building,
this word radical, you know, radical right, radical black. How about
Well, don't you think it's radical?
Radical left, you said. How about the radical right and the radical white?
don't you think it's radical
You ever use those?
to sandblast?
Do you ever use those?
Let me get back on track.
I think
it's radical.
I think it's
Another
absurd.
group
Let me just address the substance. I think it's absurd to try to sandblast history.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we need
It's
to be
radical.
able to do.
It's radical.
One of the things that we need to be able to do is be inclusive of
Right.
all history.
Right.
And if Stone Mountain, and it is a museum, and if Stone Mountain can do that and tell the whole story of the antebellum South and the Civil War, then I think they're going to attract
Many more people.
Exactly right. From all walks of life, and that's what this
It's
should
not
really
a
be
memorial
about.
to the Union forces, Jeff. It's a Confederate memorial.
No.
Well,
It
the
is, here
Confederate-
at Stone Mountain Park, and I've spent a lot of time in the park with my kids over the last couple of decades, and it's a terrific asset for all of the citizens of the state of Georgia and the Southeast, frankly. But it is an opportunity for people to learn about that period of history. So it's not just a Confederate memorial, it's an opportunity to learn about
they
the
do.
antebellum
They do
South.
teach.
It's about
Even
an
if it
opportunity to
is.
learn about slavery. It's about an opportunity to learn about the South generally. I think that's what
Let me point out, another radical group wants to rename many of the military bases in the South. That would include Fort Hood, Fort Gordon, Fort Polk, and there are many others.
Let me just say this. If
I
you're-
have always campaigned to rename Fort McPherson. Why should we have the name of an evil Yankee marauder on a major post within the city limits of Atlanta? I wrote lots of columns about that.
I
Well,
hear you.
here, some people were grateful for those evil Yankee marauders, and
True.
namely my ancestors. And the point I was going to make is that the historians say there were about 750,000 to 1 million Confederate soldiers who fought during the Civil War. At the same time, there were 500,000 enslaved black people during that period.
Okay.
And that's just what we're talking about. That was part of the Confederacy as well. And that
Just tell the whole story. And I
you know,
think that
the
that's
whole
one of the
story-
things that the Atlanta NAACP leader said. He said, let's just tell the whole story. And I think that when we tell the whole story, it
You don't
opens
tell
up
the
to
whole
everybody.
story by
what we need to be
sandblasting
able
a
to do,
mountain.
I agree with that. I
Okay.
agree with that, Phil.
Right.
And so you don't want to sandblast history, but you want to tell the
Yeah.
entire, you want to tell the whole story.
Okay.
And I think that there are people at Stone Mountain who like to be able to do that.
Now, to Dig's point on these names, if you study military history on both sides, the Union and the Confederacy, there were some brilliant, great military commanders. I think that's why they were honored.
Well, they were honored as a gesture of reconciliation. That's why
Yes.
those
Right.
Southern generals' names are on those Southern posts.
Right.
It was then, as the South began to rejoin the Union, those forts
That's
were
right.
named. All right, let's change the subject.
And as they began to, the period called redemption, when they put all the black people out of the legislature and instituted the Jim Crow laws, that's when all that took place.
All right,
that wasn't
let's-
the problem with the generals, though, Alexis.
let's change the subject. The Georgia Lottery this week, a record this past year, a record $980.5 million to go toward, I think in this case, to shore up hope, but also to
Pre-K.
return money to pre-K. That's right. The city of Atlanta, I go back all the way to when Andy Young was running against the late Sidney Marcus for mayor. And Sidney Marcus wanted to have one-stop building permits. That was his campaign thing. Cut through the bureaucracy at City Hall. And this week, the city auditor, whom I'm really starting to like, Leslie Ward, delivered a scathing report saying that the building department, having raised its fees a few years ago, now has a $28 million surplus, and it takes longer than ever to get a building permit. And of course, Kasim's in Cuba, cozying up to Castro, so I guess he's not going to.
No, he didn't stay. He came back.
He came back?
Yeah, absolutely. No, he
Gosh,
didn't become a resident.
I figured you get that trip to the communist paradise, you want to kind of stay there and soak it all up, right?
No,
All that
he's
good
looking
medical
for
care and
trade
everything?
opportunities.
All right. Fulton County is, we've said that Fulton County has a sanctuary city policy. We've lumped it in with San Francisco, but there's a move afoot to change that, right, Phil?
Yeah, I was glad to see last Wednesday at the Fulton County Commission meeting, Commissioner Bob Ellis raised the point, we want to talk with Sheriff Ted Jackson. We want to see if detainers are being honored. These are requests from ICE, the federal agents, to hold criminals as opposed to just having a warrant. And so I am very optimistic that maybe Fulton County will be honoring these federal requests so we don't have anything occurring here like we had in San Francisco. And I wish DeKalb County, I wish the city of Atlanta would try to cooperate more with the feds.
Well, I think that is one part, but the other part of the sanctuary is to offer education and healthcare services and other things to children who are here, whose parents may have brought them here illegally. And I think that's something that we should continue to do because.
So let me get this straight. Could I have a sanctuary city in Sandy Springs where we don't perform gay weddings and we can have religious liberty? Can we have that? If you're going to have a sanctuary city on the left, how about one on the right?
Well,
I don't
but Phil,
understand what you're
I
saying.
think
Phil,
you do very well understand. You've got to have the rule of law.
No,
the
Phil.
point is, you got to have the rule of law. Everyone has to obey the same thing.
Well, the point is, you don't want your children to get measles and chicken pox from some kids who have not been vaccinated because
Phil,
they're so-called
this is for
illegal.
the children.
Yes.
It's for the children.
That's what the left always says.
You can't argue this one.
The radical
It's
left.
for the
You
children.
forgot the word radical.
Thank you.
All
I
right.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind you.
Just a real quick postscript. We don't have time to get into it, but they're going to put a Roxy Theater
How about that?
at the SunTrust Braves Park in Cobb County. How about that?
Even more traffic. Yay.
All right. When we come back, some special elections, some national policy, lots of good stuff. Come on back with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at myfoxatlanta.com.
Now a little inside baseball, which we love on the Georgia Gang. We'll talk about some special elections that took place in the last week. First, in DeKalb County, the vacant District 5 commission seat was won by Marita Davis Johnson, the wife of Congressman Hank Johnson. She won handily over George Turner. I'm so tired of the AJC getting it wrong. That the people in your district didn't have representation.
Well, they didn't really
Each of
have
us has 2
representation.
commissioners.
Yeah,
in
that's
DeKalb.
exactly right.
They
And
just
you had
kept saying
2,
no
and
representation.
You had 2, and I had 1. So,
Yeah.
man, that's not quite the
That's
same.
not quite
Well,
the
what if
same.
I went to prison?
Well, that's true. Okay, yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
anyway,
you
there
all
was
should
that.
Stop doing that.
Then there was a pretty hot and interesting house race in Brookhaven. And,
right,
and we
your
focus
mayor,
on it not
former
because I
mayor.
live in Brookhaven, but because this is the first real chance in a long time for the Democrats to pick up a House seat controlled by Republicans. And in a 4-person field, Phil, the Democrat, Taylor Bennett, a young man, 29 years old, a lawyer, says his law practice is working families. So I guess he doesn't care about the poor or anybody like that, right? He just does working
Well,
families.
I tell you,
But he came
Many
first.
working families are poor, Dick, for your
He
information.
came first, and the favorite, J. Max Davis, the former mayor of Brookhaven, ran second barely.
right, that's right. And this is, there's another political aspect to this, too. The Republicans are fearful, yes, of losing the seat, but also in the Fulton County legislative delegation, that is the swing vote. That's how the Republicans control the delegation. If you lose that vote, we go back to higher taxes and dysfunctional government if a Democrat
please.
gets
Well,
in.
that's a very good point.
that's not
Catherine
even
Bernard
true.
was a spoiler in the race. She's a Ron Paul type.
That's right. She was actually, as we tape today, Catherine Bernard, the defeated Republican, is meeting with J. Max Davis, and it'll be interesting to see if she endorses J. Max Davis. I think Davis can retain
Pull it out.
that seat for the GOP.
Interesting.
Because after all, more than 60% of the vote was Republican, though Taylor Bennett, the Democrat, did run first and ran a good campaign. He's backed by every radical left group there is.
Planned Parenthood.
You
loves
got,
it.
you got me going. You shouldn't have brought it up.
No, I don't think we brought it up. I think
We
it's
call it
all fair.
accuracy.
All right, now in Roswell, Betty Price, the wife of Congressman Tom Price, won 51% of the vote to succeed Harry Geisinger in the State House. That's not a party switch. In Forsyth County, a very interesting race between Sherry Gilligan and a fellow named David Van Zandt. And Gilligan won handily, and I think the lesson there, Phil, is don't be voting in Democratic primaries and giving money to Democrats if you plan to run in a Republican primary.
That's one of the heaviest Republican districts in the state, and this Van Zandt tried to be clever, and he sent out one mailer to what he was targeting Democrat voters, saying he was a Democrat, sent out another one claiming he was a staunch conservative. That didn't work.
And Pota Kostin, the late commissioner in Fayette County, and we acknowledged her death last week. Sad, because she was extremely talented and had a great resume, and probably would have been a heck of a commissioner had she lived. But
first African American commissioner.
That's right. They've got to replace her, and they don't know quite how to go about it, because the case is tied up in court over whether Fayette may continue to have at-large voting countywide, or whether it must have districts. And that's apparently before the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Here's the details. State law stipulates, and it's a special nonpartisan election, state law stipulates that it has to be at large.
Right, and unless they decide otherwise.
In which
Right?
case you go back to...
But they're suing.
But they're going, the Board of Elections said they're going by that current state law to do it at
In
large.
which case you go back to an all-white Fayette County Commission,
Well, that isn't
which it has
guaranteed.
been for the last 150
see, I disagree.
years.
I looked at
Right.
Pota Kostin and her resume. She could have gotten elected countywide.
She never did, and no one ever did.
I don't think she ever ran countywide, did
Well, I know that there were a lot of folks who tried out there in Fayette
Well,
County,
that's
but
true.
because of the way that the elections were set up and they were all at large, it was just very difficult to get an African American elected. You had to have district voting there in order for this ever to happen, and it was an uphill battle and a long fight.
But in the defense of the establishment there, Fayette County traditionally, throughout its history, had had at-large voting. It wasn't, at-large voting was not designed to keep African Americans out of office. It was just what they'd always done, because frankly, Fayette County didn't have a lot of African Americans until recently. So I don't, it's not, there was any racist intent
I
to
don't
it.
think that there was any
effect.
intent to
There was
that.
an
That's
effect.
exactly right. That's right. And
All
we know
right,
that.
we got to get out. We'll mention quickly Scott Walker announced this week for president, making the 20th Republican candidate, came right to Georgia. Again, the importance of our SEC primary coming up in March. We don't have time to discuss what Walker said, but he was here. And when we come back, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Real quickly, I don't know what the Braves are going to do in the second half, but watching Jason Grilli, the closer, go down with a torn Achilles tendon was extremely hard to watch, and an indication of perhaps a franchise that, for this year anyway, is snake bit. Let's go to you, Jeff, for winners and losers.
Thank you very much. Well, you know, this is the sculptor, Andy Davis, who was sculpting the MLK statue for the Capitol grounds, was killed by a drunken driver. And it's just a really sad story. And we're going to have to find somebody else to either complete that work or start anew, I
Very
suppose.
popular in Stockbridge. Very,
Exactly
what a
right.
shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and Phil, how about you?
Well, I think it's a loser over in Cobb County. Did you see the story where they're rewriting the ethics code, and they want to take out the words that, you know, we don't want to be worried by any appearance of impropriety.
Yeah.
That's crazy. What?
That is crazy. I think we all agree on
Where
that
is
one,
it?
especially in Cobb County with all of the transparency.
Well,
and
with all the
accountability.
appearances of impropriety.
Thank you. And you know, I've got to make that, you mentioned the lottery. That is a winner. That is great to have that record $980.5 million pumping into our education. A lot of people forget that, and there's some new games out there that are very popular. You ought to get on the website. It's kind of fun.
I buy my jumbo bucks. The drawings are on Monday.
It is a voluntary tax.
That's right.
Well, and one reason the receipts might be so high is the Obama economy. People are driven to gamble in this terrible economy.
Okay.
Oh,
Hey,
no,
look,
I thought you were saying that
unemployment
they
in-
finally have jobs
And they finally
but
could
they
afford
they can
to.
afford lottery.
Right.
Unemployment in
Because
Georgia.
the jobs are coming back.
Unemployment in Georgia came down to 6.1%, but that's
lowest-
still terrible.
That's
It's still-
exactly
but
right.
it's still the lowest in
6.1%, as you
7
very
years.
well know, is full employment.
And it doesn't mean
I
a
know,
thing.
it's terrible. All right, Alexis, go ahead.
Okay, I've got to salute Serena Williams. She was amazing and won Wimbledon last week, and she's on her way to a Grand Slam of 3 in a row of the big majors, and she's won 4 majors already. already this
And
year.
she's 33
And she's
years
33
old.
years old, and she's
It's
amazing.
old for a tennis player.
Also, I want to salute to the National Black Arts Festival that's going on this week, and they have a focus on dance, and they had Savion Glover here. It's been very exciting for them. Congratulations. And finally, True Colors Theater Company and Actors Express have both extended the runs of their plays. Rent at Actors Express and Chasing Them Blues at True Colors.
Okay.
Good.
I'm going to kind of veer off the course here a little bit and make the loser of the week the people of the United States and the Middle East. President Obama's deal with Iran is on the surface. I haven't seen the details. Looks like a disaster because we don't have anywhere, anytime inspections, and I hope Congress rejects it.
That'll be ratified.
Secondly, the Congress, without a lot of attention, passed something called Every Child Achieves, which does away with Common Core. I'm not real comfortable with that, but I am comfortable with the fact that both Senators Isaacson and Perdue supported and worked hard on it. So I've got to have some confidence in that
And it does
education
away with No
measure.
Child Left Behind, which they need to leave that behind. I
Well,
agree
and
too.
that's true. That didn't work the way it was intended. All right. We'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.